So we're recording right now. Okay. So so hand up for question 10. Anybody have an answer? Eduardo, do you want to answer question 10?
Honestly, I don't have an answer for that, but I'm thinking that it might be 247.
Well, okay. So let's go to Teresita, because you're not. That's not the right answer, Eduardo. But
Okay, sorry.
no, that's okay. That's okay.
So I got 95.
Okay, so do you want to explain how you got it?
Well, it's asking for the average variable cost, so that wouldn't include our fixed cost.
That's true.
So it's asking for producing 9 units. So then once you input all that, that's how you get the 95.
And
then divide by 9.
Okay, so you think it's 95 divided by 9?
No. The answer is 95.
Oh, okay.
You get the variables of the function, which would be 5q plus 10q squared, and then divided by q.
Yeah, so break it down first a little bit. So we go ahead and we substitute 9 in here, and we get for this part, and just so you guys know, right? So one of the things, again, if you go back and you watch the video, super handy, is this result, which or it's not a result, it's kind of a definition. So I'll type it in the chat. Total cost is fixed cost plus variable cost. So if I know the fixed cost is 247, which we established in 9, and I calculate the total cost of producing 9 units, then, little bit of algebra, TC minus FC then is going to be equal to the variable cost, right? So, are you still with us, Teresita?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we go ahead and we put the 9 in here. So we have 5 times 9 is 45, right?
Mm-hmm.
Plus 10 times 9 squared. 9 squared is 81.
810.
810 plus 45. So we get 855.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we're going to calculate total cost, which we're kind of like doing this informally, we would just add the 247 on there, and then we end up subtracting off the 247, and we get the variable cost, which is going to be the 855. And then you took 855 and you divided by 9.
Yes.
Teresita. Okay, good job. Good job. Thank you. So let's go ahead and move on to question 11. Consider a firm with the fixed cost that and the marginal cost this. What's the total cost of producing 11 units? Okay. So who can do that one for us? You guys can work on it for a minute, and then we'll go ahead and go from there. Shelby, you want to go ahead and take this one? And Eduardo, I don't know if you still have your hand up on intentionally or not, but if you don't, then you can put it down. So Shelby? Okay. Okay. So Shelby says 253 plus 5 times 11. So remember, so take a look at the marginal cost function. I don't know if you remember. Does anybody remember? And this is the one thing that honestly, you know, is that we kind of said in passing, so it might be a little bit challenging. But yeah, right. So GenCow, so it's the area under the marginal cost curve, right? Yeah. So marginal cost is not equal um, to variable cost. So you want, okay. So Shelby's going to try again, and while Shelby, and this is why I honestly say, and I know for a lot of times you guys might think this is inconvenient, but it's good to draw things out. So the marginal cost function here passes through the through the origin. So at Q is equal to 0, it's 0, and then you can see as it increases, it's just a straight line out of the origin. And so if you go ahead and graph that, which everybody should do that, then you'll see that when Q is equal to 11, it has a height of 55, and then if you go ahead and shade in the area underneath that straight line, you'll see that there's a triangle. And so there are a lot of people who will want to use calculus, and that's fine. If you use calculus, you can integrate that function. And it's pretty simple to integrate, because if you integrate it, then there's no constant to worry about. So the area that you're integrating, when you do that, it'll come out clean, and it'll be nice, and you can calculate variable cost as being the integral of the marginal cost function. That's fine. But if you don't want to do that, then you just use the area of the triangle, 1/2 base times height. And so did you get it for us yet, Shelby? Well, again, so what you want to do is you want to draw out that function. So yeah, so let's see what you got here. So yeah, so that this first part is the height of the triangle, which is 55, and the base is 11, and then you divide it by 2, 1/2 base times height, and so I'm assuming that's That's correct, because I haven't done the calculation myself, but let's see. Okay, Shelby. Oh, that's Ruben. Ruben actually did it. So, so Shelby and Ruben. So, does anybody have any questions about what was done? Okay. And my dog is at my elbow, wanting to play with me. So, okay. So nobody has any questions. So I just want to point one other thing out, and this is kind of important for answering the last question, which is question 12. So notice that where Ruben has 11 there, we could just use Q generally, and we'd end up with the variable cost function, right? So let's go ahead and do question 12 and bear that in mind. Hey, and I guess one other last little bit is, so Shelby, are you okay? Do you see what Ruben did? Does that make sense to you? Well, okay. So so the next question is, did you graph the MC? You did. Okay. So well, okay, let me do a tool thing here and see if I can help out here. Maybe it's possible I can just draw on this. Okay. So this is the way your graph should look. So you can see this is P and this is Q. And I'm going to do this again. And so the marginal cost should, here we go. Should look like this, coming straight out of the origin. And this is, you know, Q is equal to 11 or something there, right? So I'll put a little, so the height's 55 and so there's Q is equal to 11 and okay. So there's that, and maybe I can do some shading. So I'm going to try to shade in this triangle, right? And it's kind of hard to get the shader to get all the way in there. But anyway, So Shelby, you can see the triangle, right? So that's where the 1/2 comes from, right? There's the height at 55, and there's the base of 11, 1/2 base times height. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So did anybody get number 12 yet? If you got number 12, then go ahead and raise your hand.
Professor,
Yeah.
just a quick question about number 12. I feel like I know where to start, but I'm not exactly sure where to go. Because I know marginal cost equals the average total cost at its minimum point.
Right.
And that is going to be equal to total cost divided by quantity, but I'm kind of losing it because it's not giving like a certain quantity at where this is.
Well, yeah, because you're supposed to solve for that Q where they intersect. So remember, and I know you know, hopefully you guys begin to see the pattern here, but for supply and demand, right, we have two equations, and where they intersect is the answer we're normally looking for. That's the equilibrium, right? Quantity. You don't know what it is, but you have these two equations that describe a supply and demand curve, right? In the case of the consumer optimization problem, you have these two equations. One of them is the tangency condition, and the other one is the budget constraint. And you're solving for the quantity where they intersect. In that case, it's the quantity of, you know, the quantity of X you're going to purchase in your optimal consumption bundle. Here, you got two equations, and you know, one of them is the marginal cost equation, and the other one is the equation for average total cost. And when you find the Q that satisfies both of them at the same time, that's the Q where they intersect. So does that make sense, Greg?
Yeah. So it would essentially be total cost equals fixed cost plus variable cost. Fixed cost is given. Variable cost would be the area under MC, the marginal cost.
Yep.
Okay, I guess it's just a math issue for me then.
So what you really need first is you need to get an equation for your total cost, like we have in question 10. If I'd given you the equation for total cost, and
Right.
I'd given you the equation for marginal cost in that question, then it would be easy, right? So the only really little hitch is, you know, how do I end up with an equation for variable costs? Because then, like in question number 10, I could just add that to the fixed cost component. So if you go back through the chat, I'm scrolling back to where I'd written down, you know, total cost is equal to variable cost plus fixed cost. So
Right.
If you just need the total cost equation, that's what's really missing, and then you just set marginal cost is equal to that total cost, and then if you have a total cost, you can get average total cost by dividing that by whole thing by Q. So
Okay, got it. I'm gonna try and run through the math right now.
Okay.
Thanks.
So who wants to answer the question? Efren, you want to tell us, because you put something in chat.
Yeah, I got a 9.92 for the answer.
Okay, so do you want to walk us through a little bit what you did?
Well, I mean, firstly, you have to make sure you know like your variable costs, your fixed cost, your total cost, right?
Right.
And then you have to remember that your average total cost is equal to your marginal cost. I mean, it's a little easier if you graph it out, kind of like how you were showing us. You know, it just makes it easier to understand conceptually. Right. So, you know, I ended up getting 8Q raised to 2 plus
Okay.
788 divided by the quantity. And
Yeah.
so
you're saying the variable cost ends up being 8Q squared, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So your total cost function then is 7, and let's see if I can do this in the annotation. Okay, annotation text. I'll type this here. So you got total cost is equal to 788 plus 8Q, and I'm just gonna use this because we don't have math functions there. That's raised to the second power. So that's what you got, Efren, for total cost. Yeah. Efren.
what was that?
So this is what you got for the total cost function.
Yeah, so that's what I got for the total cost function.
Yeah, and then like you said, for average total cost, then we take all of that and we divide it by Q, because that's our definition, right?
Yes.
And
yeah,
then we set that equal to the marginal cost function, and we solve for Q, right? And so okay, and then you ended up getting let's see if I can turn off this annotation stuff, and you end up getting that when you solve for Q.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay, Efren.
Clap for myself.
You know, it's the little things in life. You have to celebrate those little victories. If you don't, you're missing out. So, so does anybody have any questions? I mean, we didn't actually end up solving the problem, and I, kind of left it as a partial solution because it's better that you kind of finish it up yourself, because that way you'll be more likely to remember it. But does anybody have any questions? Okay, so Ian, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. So did you watch the videos?
I did not.
Gotta watch those videos.
I will do that straight after.
Yeah. So what you're supposed to do before, I told you guys to do last year. I know you guys are on Corona time, which means like no. Stop streaming the Netflix. and I'm as guilty as anybody.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, so the minimum point is where marginal cost is equal to average total cost. So yeah, Efren's right. You set it equal to MC. But if you were to set this equal to 16Q and then solve for Q.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. I need to watch those videos.
You got to watch this video. Well, you know, honestly, in my opinion, like the cost curve stuff is kind of challenging, but in a different way than most of the stuff that we have in economics, because there are just so many relationships and so much going on. It's a little bit like my complaint about trigonometry, is there's really stuff to memorize. I mean, if you don't memorize that total cost is equal to fixed costs plus variable costs, you're like dead in the water. If you don't memorize, you know, and maybe it's intuitive, but you know, average, and then likewise, average total cost is equal to average fixed cost plus average variable cost, and the relationship between all of those. And then, you know, you don't memorize the shutdown rule. You don't memorize, you know, that the marginal cost will intersect the average total cost at its minimum point, that kind of stuff. You just don't memorize that stuff, then, you know, I don't know. I mean, and the only reason why I've memorized it is because, you know, I spent a lot of time doing this stuff. But when I was a student, you know, I remember just seeing all those relationships and thinking like, what? I have to memorize all this stuff? And yeah, there's not really another good way to go. Okay, so we spent a lot of time on this first section, and that's fine. But what I want to do now is move on. So for those of you guys, and I'll just make sure that there's nobody else waiting at the door here in a minute, and I'll minimize that, and okay. Oh, Jin, you have your hand up. I didn't notice. Did you want to say something? Oh, is it down now? Oh,
I actually have a quick question, Professor.
yeah.
How do you, I'm realizing I don't understand how to get 8Q squared. Is it just, I'm noticing it's half of the marginal cost. Is there any relationship there? No?
Well, okay. So there is a calculus relationship that's embedded in this, and I don't know. Have you had calculus, Ian?
Yes, I took the first class.
Yeah. And did you take business calc, or did you take?
Not yet.
No. Yeah. Well, because business calc is like
Is it a bit different?
well, yeah. You shouldn't take business calc. You take the regular calc, then that's
did.
better.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So it's actually, did you remember normally like and I don't know how they do it at Cal Poly, but normally at the end of the first semester they do integration.
Yes.
Yeah. So the variable cost curve is the integral of the marginal cost curve. So if you remember the you know, power rule,
Right.
so it's just, you
Oh,
know, yeah, so it's 1/2 of 16 is 8, but then you raise the variable to the next power, so it's q to the 1, then it's going to be q to the 2.
yeah.
So that's true. But you can also get exactly the same thing using the triangle formula.
Okay.
It's just you have to, you know, in my little illustration, you would just change, you know, the height is arbitrarily at 16q and the base is q for whatever q. So 1/2 q times 16q is going to give you 8q squared.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I don't know if that makes sense or not, but we can talk about it a little bit more in a minute. I'll just draw another little illustration, just like the general case, to try to be clear. So in our case, so hopefully everybody can see this. You guys can see the green illustration I've drawn on the left. Can you see that, Ian?
Yeah, so I think I'm starting to understand what you're saying. When you said 1/2 Q times 16Q, that's the 1/2 base times height. The
Yeah.
base is Q, and then the height is what you would be producing at.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is Q for any given Q. And yeah, and so like the difference is that so what you guys are used to is having a specific quantity, and this is just an arbitrary quantity, but the height of that triangle is still 16Q for any given Q, and its base is Q. Yeah, so 1/2 Q times 16Q.
Perfect.
And you know, actually that's how they get the integral formula. You know, like calculus seems like it's complicated, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. They just mess with people. So, like I said, calculus isn't hard. It's trig that's hard, and trig is only hard because you have to memorize a bunch of stuff.
All right. Thank you. That was perfect.
Okay, great. Okay, so let me go ahead and get the eraser here and erase all this stuff. Okay. So let's go ahead and talk about, so the next assignment that you guys should be working on is the monopoly assignment. Okay, I misspoke last time, and I'll put it in the chat, just so you guys know. As soon as I can find the chat. Yeah, the Zoom interface on my side is, because I'm doing different stuff, it's more complicated. So okay, and there is no so the reason why there's no competition homework is that I moved everything just into Monopoly. So you notice that the Monopoly homework is a little bit longer. And so I guess this is a good place. The one thing that I wanna remind you guys about, so last time we talked about the challenges of aggregating marginal cost curves. And that happens here starting in question 15. So, you know, you want to pay attention to that. And I guess that's where I'll start talking about this other stuff. And so I'm gonna stop the screen share and move to a whiteboard. Okay, there's the whiteboard. Okay. Okay, I guess that should work. So we are going to talk about competition, but we're just going to do competition as contrasted to monopoly and the other forms of industry structure we want to talk about before the end of the semester. So Corno, and which is an oligopoly in particular. That's the one that we're most interested in because it's the most common oligopoly model. And then we'll talk about, these are kind of a little bit of reach topics. We'll talk about Bertrand, the Bertrand model of oligopoly, and Stackelberg. You know, that's where we're going. So what can we say about competition versus monopoly? And let's see if I can get a different format for our font. So I guess the first part is to know that we want to talk about a competitive firm and make sure that we differentiate that from a competitive industry. Okay. So the relationship there is, you know, the firm is the individual unit of production, and the industry is the market supply. So on a mathematical level, you're doing like what we did last time we got together, which is you're aggregating these individual firms' cost functions to get to the industry supply. But that's the way that it works, is we analyze what's happening at the individual firm level, and then that gives us the form of behavior that we're going to expect at the market level. And so far in this class, we've dealt almost exclusively, though not entirely, it depends upon, you know, how good your memory is and the things that I mentioned in passing as we were talking. But, you know, we've been just talking about market supply curves or industry supply curves. So the relationship between the individual firm supply curve and the market supply curve is you know, something that takes a little bit of time to discuss. But for the competitive firm, and this is the key, is the competitive firm is what we call a price taker. And if they're a price taker, another way of saying that is to say that they have no market power. So see if I can stretch that out a little bit. So this becomes really important in trying to talk about the behavior of the competitive firm, because if you think about it, right, we know that all firms have this objective. Now, notice I said all firms have the objective to maximize profit. Okay. So now we have to be precise that profit is equal to revenue minus cost, but I want to emphasize, so revenue minus, and I'm going to write this once, but it's something you guys are supposed to remember, that if we talk about cost and I don't put a modifier in front of it, you're supposed to know that I mean total, and in there should be opportunity cost. And again, if you guys, and you guys will kind of find this a little bit more as you go along. I think one of the challenges is that in everyday conversation, people say a lot of things, and half of what they say isn't important. It doesn't have anything to do with anything. They're just, words are just coming out of their mouth. But when we do things in academia, one of the things that gets kind of challenging is if somebody says something. It's kind of like I used to tell my kids all the time. So my son was little and he was first learning how to read. I got him an electronic dictionary, and you guys know the value of the electronic dictionary, right? I was trying to make his life easy, because if you wanna get good at reading, then you got to look words up that you don't understand. And it used to frustrate me because he would just want to try to figure it out from the context. It's called being lazy, right? And I used to do the same thing too. But remember, back in the day, we didn't have electronic dictionaries. So I had to sit there with that big, thick dictionary. And every time I got to a word I didn't know, I had to flip open the page and I had to find it. And then I had to read it. And anyway, so it took me a lot more effort. But I got into the habit of doing that because that's what you're supposed to do, right? So, Shelby, I saw that you put in the chat, "Oh Lord." So I gotta ask before I go on with my dictionary story. Is there is it just a simple exclamation, or is there a question behind that? Oh, okay. Yeah, right. So now we get back into the grinding part of it. Okay. Yeah, be super focused. But remember, at least this time we're recording, so you can skip past, this stuff and just get to the meat of things. And hopefully that'll be better. So, oh yeah, so I'm gonna finish my story, Celine. So anyway, yeah, if you want to get good, you really have to like look up words. So anyway, I got in the habit of doing that. But it becomes even more important in academia because honestly, there's no word when I'm describing this stuff that I'm saying just I try to, meaning that it doesn't really matter, it's okay if you don't know what we're talking about, or so the important point is like what you should do is when you see something like opportunity cost and you're like what does he really mean there, just skip it. You're probably missing something that's really important. So like miss it at your own peril. That's all I can say. I mean, if you guys don't know what I mean by opportunity cost in here, um, I would say that the most important issue is that it's different from accounting cost. You got to remember that. Accountants only count explicit costs. And I've said this to you, and it's also in the videos, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time in it. You guys should watch the videos. But accountants are only interested in tracking cash flows. They're not interested in what we are interested in, which is, figuring out how to minimize the overall costs of production. That's true. We talked about that already. But the most important thing is that opportunity cost includes a normal rate of return. And the reason that's super important is you're going to get this prediction later, and I'll put it down here, that in the competitive equilibrium, okay, firms earn 0, and I guess I'll capitalize it, 0 economic profit. And I'll even put the economic in parentheses. And the reason I'm doing that too is because it's often left out. I mean, this is an economics class, right? So obviously we should be interested in profit from an economic perspective, not from an accounting perspective or some other perspective. So when we get to the prediction of 0 economic profit, the question, and it's a good question because it shows that people, notice there's something going on that seems weird. If you come up with a prediction that firms are earning 0 profit, that seems to fly in the face of common sense. And I think common sense, is really, it's something that I have an issue with, because it really just means, that people aren't thinking very carefully most of the time. But nevertheless, without disparaging common sense, it's what most people have available to them. If somebody tells you, listen, businesses are trying to maximize profits, but at the end of the day, they end up with 0 profit, then, that should, cause a little firestorm in your brain. And you should say, whoa, wait a minute. How is that? Well, it's because we have this special definition of profit that we're using. 0 economic profit includes a normal rate of return from an accounting perspective. So even if you're earning 0 economic profit, you're still earning, remember, on average, businesses make about 7% accounting profit per year. That's normal. So we also, and maybe this will make you a little bit more comfortable, but a 0 profit is also what we call normal profit. And if you're making more than 0 profit from an economic perspective, we say that's supernormal profit, which means basically that you're killing it. You're making money hand over fist. Your rate of return is much higher than the normal rate of return. So that's kind of just to, set the stage. I don't know if you guys have any questions at this point in time, but if you do, go ahead and raise your hand. Okay. Seeing no hands, I move on. So let's be a little bit more precise. So I'm just going to write capital P as profit. And, well, actually, that's bad. I don't have a pi, so I'm going to have to write it out. So we said it's revenue, but revenue is price of the good times the quantity sold minus your total costs of production. And I told you guys before we left, and things got, crazy. Why should she say just highly unusual, once in 100-year epidemic, that kind of thing. I said that this total cost function was a result of the firm's cost minimization problem. And if you guys don't remember that, then go back and review the firm's cost minimization problem in the book. The main point is that the cost function of the firm can be different depending upon their different target level of production. And I don't want to talk about it more than that for right now, but one of the things that you should note is that revenue is one piece of this, but we also have this other piece, which is the firm's total costs. And in particular, what that ends up telling us is that it's necessary. So the way you'd put it is that maximizing profit implies that you have to minimize your costs. Okay. And so that's how we got to the firm's cost minimization problem. So under competition, then under competition, firms are going to be minimizing their costs. And then the question is, well, what happens with their revenue? Well, since the firms have no market power, the price is equal to the market price. And the firms just have to accept the market price and decide whether or not they can produce at a profit at that particular price. So the firms have no pricing power is the main point. So normally the way that we describe this is we start out with two graphs, and one of them is the one that you guys are familiar with. We'll have this as being the industry, or what we call the market graph, and this is our familiar demand and supply. And then you end up with you guys can see here where the market equilibrium price would be. So I'm just gonna put over here on the edge P star. So you can see there where that would be from the equilibrium. And then on the firm side, and here's the firm's quantity, and I don't have an option here to draw something that's dashed. So I'll just try to do it as an extra skinny line. So here's our market equilibrium price. And so this is what the firm sees as the demand for their product. So there are a couple things going on here, and we should say them. So the question is, why does the competitive firm have to accept the market price? So that's my question to you guys. And so raise some hands and tell me like why it is that you guys think that must be true. I don't see any hands yet. So just while we're waiting for people to gather their thoughts, I want to point out that this line at the market price is the individual market demand curve, but at the industry level, you have a downward sloping demand curve. Okay. Okay, I don't, let me see. Who has a hand? Okay, Jin, you have a hand up. And Jesse has a hand up. And Ruben has a hand up. Okay, so let's do Jin first. Jin, tell us what you think. You don't have a mic, Jin? No mic. Okay, you guys. Get on Amazon and order a mic. Okay, so Jen says because individual firms scale are small, therefore the quantities they produce cannot impact price. Okay, it's a good answer. Okay, so I'm gonna write down here small scale. Okay, and so Jesse, do you want to chime in?
Can't you just say that if, for instance, if their price is higher, then they'll get priced out of the market or something?
Okay. And you want to add more than that? Or I mean, I'm not trying to press you too hard, but you want to know?
Not really.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, Ruben, you want to? I'm gonna stick a pin in your priced out of the market thing. It's not there was nothing wrong with that observation. Ruben? Oh, and you don't have a mic either? No mic. Okay, so Ruben says if they rise the price above the market, price can be provided from other suppliers, hence they'll be out of business. And and that's true too. And that's kind of like what Jesse, I think, was saying. Kind of like and I would encourage you guys both, to think that first, right? Because that's the essence of saying that they're price takers, and there are lots of situations in which you can have, and I'll put that down, price takers. Okay. And there's lots of situations in which you can have what we would call a price taking equilibrium. And that's just another word for a competitive equilibrium. But you would be surprised that there are situations that don't necessarily seem competitive, where price taking emerges. So it's kind of like, well, you know, price taking is what we're talking about, but to kind of put a little bit more, you know, meat on the question. So the small scale thing gets to this point about like, well, when is it a case that a firm has to, what are the circumstances in an industry that results in price taking behavior by firms? And so one of them is that a lot of people say, well, yeah, in a competitive industry, the competitive firm is a small part of the overall market. That's fine. That's you know, the small scale observation. But you know, the other thing that people have noticed is, in particular, is that there's a homogeneous product in most of these markets. And so, you know, the question is, well, I guess, you know, what do we mean by homogeneous product? And a homogeneous product is a product that is identical regardless of who produces it. So you guys want to remember the homogeneous or homogeneous product because it's a common, again, you know, technical way of describing it. But to say that firms are selling identical products is another thing that people, you know, often talk about. And then the other thing that becomes even more important is that firms use the same technology to produce their product. So these are all conditions. Now, I want to soften this a little bit, saying firms use the same technology, and rather say firms have access to the same technology. And so maybe we're running out of a little bit of room here. So I'll try to put it down here and then maybe pull it out a little bit. And okay. So yeah, these are the things that people normally talk about. They say, well, they tend to be small firms in relative to the overall size of the market in a competitive industry. The products are identical, and the firms have access to the same types of production technology. Now, you know, you might ask yourself, well, what role is the same technology access being, you know, in you know, this whole conclusion? And that's why I put an arrow here. If you have like these conditions in the industry, then firms tend to be price takers. It tends to be a more competitive industry. But the access to the same technology, the work that that's doing is it's saying, well, there's no reason. Remember, technologies have to do with your way of producing. There's no reason that firms should have different costs of production. You know, there's not like a patent or a special production technique. There's not some special resource that one firm has or a particular group of firms have that other firms don't have access to. So, you know, you might think about, you know, and I'll ask you guys this question. Can you guys think of, so Greg asks, says, can it be explained through elasticity? Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, it depends on which elasticity you're talking about. But here, the elasticity of demand for a perfectly competitive firm is, it's perfectly elastic. It's a horizontal line, but that doesn't really explain it, right? It's just an observation. So, it's a description. Descriptions aren't necessarily explanations. So, so you guys give me a couple of examples of firms in your everyday life that seem like they're competitive to you. So Gencaus is an agricultural product, yeah. But okay. What agricultural product are you talking about, Jen? I'm gonna press you a little bit. Rice. Okay. So rice, potatoes, fine. Those are homogeneous products, basically. Though not really. I don't know about you, but my wife has a special brand of rice. She prefers basmati rice. So, but anyway, that's fine. Let's just pretend that's not the same. And Ricardo says gasoline, so that's homogeneous too. Yeah, I agree. And you do see, like in gasoline, basically uniform pricing. Rice is a little bit difficult. So I don't know about computers, because there, I don't know about you guys. I'm using a MacBook. MacBooks sell for more than PCs. The operating system is different, and lots of people prefer Mac OS. So I don't know. I mean, here we're getting a little bit. And I don't know that there are lots of firms that produce computers. That one's hard. But and so one of the things that and I'm not going to go through the whole list. I want to think about, so I guess I'll go back to Jen, and I'll say, well, what rice are you talking about? So I mentioned basmati rice. Is there a particular rice or a particular potato that you buy? Ah, okay. So you just buy whatever rice there is, right? So all rices are equal: long grain, short grain, brown, white, whatever. That's fine. Yeah, it's interesting. So um so I was trying to get something like more palpable, because one of the things that, meaning like something you can actually touch, something more tangible. So I don't know if you really buy rice regularly or have any idea of how rice is produced. I don't. I mean, I know that agricultural commodities tend to be uniformly priced and produced at an industrial scale. I've never personally seen a rice farm. So like rice and soybeans and stuff like that. I mean, I know in the sense that, I've been told, but I don't really know how many rice producers there are, and um, if there is really uniform pricing in rice or anything like that, if they're a small part of the market. I imagine that's all true. So I wouldn't quibble with your example on the basis of the facts that we have, but I would say that because I don't really have an idea of what's going on in rice, I can't check off any of these boxes. I can't say, okay, small scale, identical products, firms access to the same technology. I don't know. The identical products, well, obviously, like I said, there's some people that actually do have like pretty strong rice preferences. So I think potatoes are a little bit clearer, though I have to say, I don't know if you guys ever go to the grocery store and you buy potatoes, but you have your regular old brown potato, and I think that's the one that we're talking about. But then you have these days all of these like heirloom and special versions. You get the red potatoes, and then there's another one I think they call it Yukon Gold, and it's like a yellow potato, and it's kind of like the red potato, but it's yellow. I've even seen purple potatoes. So, and they sell for different prices. So, but yeah, I agree that agricultural commodities, are the most common example. I think, I go down to Ricardo's example next, which has to do with gasoline, and I think gasoline is a good example because, again, there you see that people, switch back and forth between like Shell and Chevron gasoline. I don't spend a whole lot of time shopping for gasoline other than to shop on the basis of price. And I think that that's kind of one of the keys. If there are lots of options and you're shopping on the basis of price, and that's probably a pretty competitive market. Now, I want to tell you, a lot of people don't think that the gasoline market is competitive because they get kind of hung up on the idea that at the oil production stage and the refining stage, there are, a relatively small number of firms engaged in oil production and refining. But what I would say is that when we're really talking about retail gasoline service, and I don't know if you guys drive around and you see there are Shell and Chevron stations, but like near me, there are a bunch of other no-name just retail gas stations and in my neighborhood, and they're the ones I normally buy from because they seem to be a little bit less expensive. But at the retail level, I've been told there's a very, very thin margin, a small markup on gasoline, and lots of times that if you talk about something like a gas station with an AMP attached to it, that they're selling their gasoline at such a thin price markup that the only way that they're making money is by people that are coming and stopping and going into the store and actually buying gasoline, not buying gasoline, but buying coffee and buying drinks from them. So, and computers, we talked about that, UPS, FedEx, DHL. Well, there you put, like Greg, a few delivery services, and I don't know that there are a whole lot more. So I would say that on the surface of it, it doesn't look like they're small scale and a lot of them. The only thing that I think that when you get into the delivery that makes it a little bit weird is there's also the government run monopoly of the postal office, or the post office, right? So, and Aubrey says soda. Soda, I think, is kind of a weird one because most people would say that Coke and Pepsi and Dr. Pepper are not identical products. They're products that are differentiated. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the class, but when you get to differentiated products, we're talking about what we call monopolistic competition, and things look a little bit different. So types of water bottles, so Ian says, isn't gas produced on a small scale? Well, the production isn't at a small scale. Oil refineries are huge. They're like little cities unto themselves. But so and bottled water, like I don't really know. Again, it seems like there's a lot of product differentiation at the consumer level. Like I don't know. Does anybody have a favorite bottled water? I do. And I'm talking about a still, not sparkling. So there's differentiated. Yeah, for me too. Fiji is my favorite. What about you, Shelby? Were you gonna put a favorite bottled water down? Not this. No, not that one. So, okay. Oh, that's your favorite. Well, anyway, I think Dasani is fine too, or Dasani, or whatever, however you spell it. Kirkland water's disgusting. Okay, now you're starting to sound like my kids. So, and yeah, smart water, I don't know if it really makes you smart or not. I mean, come on. But anyway, yeah, my favorite is Fiji, but I almost never buy it because it's too expensive. So, you know, I would just drink water at home, tap, you know. So there's a lot of product differentiation in the bottled water too. So I don't know, but and I don't see uniform pricing, so it makes me kind of wonder. And I will say this to you guys, that almost all of the products that we actually purchase as consumers fall into the category of monopolistic competition. Monopolistic competition is where you have firms intentionally trying to differentiate their goods to get market power. So if you see something and there's some marketing involved, so probably the plain old brown potato that you see at the supermarket is, you know, maybe something you have contact with. But before we go on any further, I want to, because we gotta have to kind of wrap this up in a few minutes. I want to say that you know, these are conditions that lead to price taking behavior. Whenever you have price taking behavior, you have a competitive market and competitive equilibrium. So you might not check all these boxes, but if you can still argue that at the end, the firms are forced to be price takers, so the demand curve at the firm level, and I'll put this down here. So this is the individual firm. So at the individual firm level, you end up having this horizontal demand curve faced by the firm. Then this is where you end up getting competitive behavior at the firm level. Okay. And I actually was kind of hoping you guys would talk a little bit about, you know, boba shops. I don't know if you guys have boba around you, but I have lots of boba shops around me, and or like frozen yogurt. And there, you know, I don't see a lot of product differentiation. And I do see sort of uniform pricing, and it seems like they have access to the same technology for making the boba. So I think that if I was going to try to think of something, like, I know I walk into the boba shop and I see them with a little machine that puts the plastic over the top of the cup, and I see them, you know, I can kind of have this palpable sense of the technology that they're using, and the products seem pretty similar. The only thing that affects my decision, because all the boba places around me, you know, the boba drinks are about the same price, is like location. You know, whichever one's closest to me is the one that I go to. So once consumers start shopping on the basis of price, and that's their primary consideration, or convenience, so I'll say this: when consumers are shopping on the basis of price alone or convenience, not brand name or some special characteristic, then the market is competitive. So hopefully that makes sense. I don't know if you guys have any questions for me about really what the essence of competition is. But I'm going to go ahead and draw this time squiggly line. And so this is our beloved marginal cost curve. And you can, you know, we deal a lot of times with linear marginal cost curves, and that's really kind of atypical. It's more often the case that you're going to have this part where in the beginning marginal cost declines and then it begins increasing after that. And so remember, so we had this other idea, and I'll mention it over here on the side. And diminishing returns. And we'll have to come back to that. But what's really happening here is that as the firm begins to produce, initially their costs of production fall. And remember, this is the cost of each individual unit. And then at some point in time, diminishing returns kicks in, and thereafter the cost of production rise. So there are a lot of different ways to describe diminishing returns. Diminishing returns can be described as that, but to be more precise, you would call it diminishing marginal productivity, or diminishing returns to fixed factors of production. So the idea is that while it is you could hire extra workers in the short run if you have fixed factors, because remember you have fixed costs in the short run, those are fixed factors of production. So you have like a fixed size of factory, you'll get some crowding and your workers' productivity will fall, not because they're getting lazy or they're overworked, but because they don't have enough machines, tools, and equipment to work with. So there's a cause behind diminishing returns that we talk about, and that's those fixed factors of production. If you don't have any fixed factors, you can just scale everything up and you know, match workers with machines and keep producing, and your costs don't have to go up. But before we leave off for today, I just want to point out one thing really quickly, and that is that if you ask, well, given the firms are trying to maximize their profit, what quantity will they choose to produce? Then what you end up with is this. Here is for the firm, so I'll write it as little q star. That is the quantity that the firm chooses to maximize their profit. Notice that Q star for the competitive firm is defined by price is equal to marginal cost. Okay, now I'm going to put a more general rule, which is marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, which you'll see coming up over and over again. The key here is for each of our different forms of industry, monopoly, and so on, the marginal revenue is going to change. what's special about competition is that because the firm is a price taker, okay, then their revenue is how much money they bring in from the sale of an additional unit. That's their marginal revenue. And so you can see for each of these units, and I'm going up and down here between marginal cost and the price, which is in the case of competition equal to marginal revenue. So I'll try to emphasize this here if I can. And so marginal revenue is equal to price for the competitive firm. Marginal revenue won't be equal to price for the monopolists and in other cases. So what you can see is that for each of these units, if the firm's cost of production is down here, but that they get revenue up here along where the horizontal demand curve is, then each one of these units is going to bring the firm some additional profit. The distance between marginal cost and the price the firm's receiving is marginal profit. It's also what we called producer surplus, if you guys remember, right? Producer surplus is the area above the firm's supply curve and below the price the firm receives. Well, the firm's going to receive this price, and there's their marginal cost, remember, is what we called before the supply curve for the individual firm. But now we have a justification. We can say, I mean, the point of this is to explain why the marginal cost curve is the competitive firm's supply curve. And the reason is because the competitive firm is trying to maximize profits. And so as soon as their costs of production go above the revenue, as soon as the cost of those units is above the revenue that they can receive, then they're not going to produce those units because they won't make money off it. It won't be profitable. Okay, so since we're winding up here, we went a little bit over, but I'll give you guys a chance to ask a question before we shut it down. You guys have any questions? Raise a hand. No? Okay. So if you guys do have a question, I didn't see your hand, you can unmute yourself and you can ask it. Otherwise, I will see you guys on Thursday.
Professor?
Yeah.
Midterm is Thursday, right?
No. So I thought I told you guys before, but we're really kind of in wait mode right now. We're just going to continue lecturing. I think that we're not going to get a chance to meet each other live again. Alive, yes, but next semester, but not in IRL, right? So until we get a little bit more information, I mean, I still intend on doing your guys' exams on Ignithium, but it'll be a little bit more complicated. You know, the biggest problem is just, you know, and obviously, you know, it would be timed and we do it the same way. You know, in general, I have like a minimum standard for this class, but I don't curve things for A, B's, and C's. So it's a little bit challenging for me to figure out how to grade you guys. You know, if you guys have the exams at home and stuff like that. So,
Gotcha.
you know, that's kind of a little bit of a challenge for me. But you know, I'll work it out. But I think we'll still probably do the Ignithium exams. And then, just so you guys know, probably what I would do is if, you know, I give you guys an Ignithium exam to do at home and everybody nails it and like, you know, whatever, then, and I couldn't really differentiate between you guys, I would just probably like, I'd either have like two choices. One would be like to give everybody a B and call it a day. And then the other thing that I could do is I could do a session like this and put a question up on the whiteboard and give you guys like 30 minutes to do it, and then have everybody put their answer up at the same time, and I could just rank all your guys' answers like that way, and have you guys scan it to me. So I could do, and I would only do that not for the purposes of determining if you like are going to pass the class or not. That would just be based on your Ignithium work, like in the past. But but well, I want to notice, you guys, I'm not giving everybody a B. You still have to do the exam, and you still gotta, you know, pass it with a 70% or better. I'm just talking about how after you guys pass, I figure grades out after that, because normally I can rank people based on their Ignithium work and stuff like that, and I can figure out who's an A and who's a B and so forth, and who's a C. But probably we would just do it based on Ignithium towards the end of the semester. And then if I had real concerns about, you know, there not being enough differentiation, then I would have to, you know, figure out some other way to give you guys a chance to distinguish yourself, right? So and you know, that's kind of, you know, the best we can do. We're, you know, but anyway, as far as exams are concerned, the exams are they're going to happen, but I'm going to wait and see if I can do them proctored in a setting like we normally do, then that's it. But if we never get a chance to go back to campus and we have to do things, then we have to be a little bit creative. And yes, Ricardo, these are exceptional circumstances, and trust me, this is exceptional. So, yeah, well, yeah, we can't base everything off the first exam either, because that's you know, not fair either. So anyway, we'll figure it out. But the main point is that exams are coming your way, but you might just end up, we might just end up like spending the last 2 weeks and just doing Ignithium exams for like the second and third midterm, and that may be all there is. Well, okay, so maybe Ricardo, you saw something that I didn't. I just know two things. I saw one email that said that I think that they'd pushed the date out further, and I forget what the most recent, you know, potential date of the making another decision about it is. And the second thing is that I'm also holding out some hope that they might change their mind. And you guys know that I've been a little bit ahead of the curve on predicting the disruption that this disease might cause. But I also think that there are a lot of smart people right now that are figuring out that, you know, the vulnerable population isn't us. And so to the extent that we can protect people who need to be protected, but let other people go about their business, that seems, you know, to be better for everybody. And the economic cost of this is getting pretty steep. So I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, but even if you end up getting $1,000 from the government, it's not free money. You know, it's deficits or future taxes, and that's why I told you guys that I think I told you guys I felt bad, particularly for you guys, because right now it seems like you're the least vulnerable, but paying the highest costs in terms of future taxes and present opportunities foregone. So, sorry. Anyway, I wish you guys all the best, and I will see you guys on Thursday. In the meantime, wash your hands.